up, people? Multiplier here, and we have pointing. That's become one of my new catchphrases, pointing at the screen. Just kind of filling up space with my arms. But yeah, one of the most requested things I get asked, and that is how to EQ. So we're going to EQ some hi-hats, and we're going to cover two of the most important ideas when you're EQing. Going to cover cutting out the lows, first of all, and then we're going to do surgical EQing to remove pesky resonance, those pesky resonances. So let's show you the hi-hat. You've got to imagine there's some sort of kick drum there, and then the hi-hat's going that sort of thing. But we just have the hi-hat because that's just how we roll. Super dry, nice and simple, just so we can demonstrate what's going on. So let's grab the EQ8. It doesn't matter if you have Ableton or a plugin or Logic or whatever, all these ideas do apply. It's just the general concept. And yeah, there's loads of different EQs. Doesn't matter which one you use, really. So we'll hit this little button, make it nice and big, and we'll see in this spectrum analyzer exactly what frequencies are in this hi-hat. So looking at this hi-hat, we see there is quite a lot of low-end rumble, which is what we're going to cut out. We have not much going on in the middle, and then we have the high frequencies, hence the hi-hat. So they're going to be the key bits we want in our sound. So first thing we're going to do is cut the lows out. So to do that, it's nice and simple. We want a steep high pass or a low cut. Call it what you like. So we'll kick it into ×4. So it's like 4 lots of high passes, so it's nice and steep. And then we literally just drag it about until we can hear the sound change, and then we tone it back. So I'll show you what I mean. Still sounds the same. Still sounds the same. Still sounds the same. Starting to change. Still sounds the same around there. Starting to change sounds, I reckon around there. That should be fine. And the basic idea behind this is we're cutting out frequencies that aren't contributing to the sound in any useful way. So this hi-hat, the thing that conceptually makes it a hi-hat, are those high frequencies. That low frequency rumble that's in there isn't actually contributing to the hi-hat sound in any way at all. If we flip it, so we're cutting out everything but the low end, you'll hear exactly what that low end rumble is. So if we change this to be a low pass, you can hear, in fact, what it actually is rumble from the low end coming from a reverb. So chances are this was either a recorded hi-hat or it was synthesized and put in a reverb space. But when we have a complicated mix and we have a bass line in particular happening at the same time as these hi-hats, that low frequency reverb rumble is going to get completely lost. So its effect is actually going to be not to provide a subtle reverb space for the hi-hat, but it's just going to get in the way of the bass and cause a bit of interference, and it's just going to muddy the whole thing up. So we want to cut it out because it's not contributing to our sound in any useful way. So we kick it back into high pass. And there you go, our nice low cut. And that's something we do with pretty much every element that isn't a kick or a bass. So when it comes to EQing, that's by far the most popular thing you want to do. So let's now have a look at the surgical EQ side of things. So we're going to play a different hi-hat, which is this one. Just because this one definitely has a pesky resonance, as they're sometimes called. I sometimes call it, other people do as well. So we have this hi-hat here. It's a little bit different. It's got more of a subtle snare type attack to it. Sounds quite nice. Sounds cool. So let's grab an EQ8 out, if I can talk in a sentence. EQ8, and then hit this little button so we can see it nice and big and see what's going on with the frequencies this time. So first thing we want to do is, like before, we want to cut out any low frequency stuff we don't need. So same process again. We will get a steep low pass filter and move it until it changes the sound in a way we don't want, and then we'll ease back to the point just before there. In this case, because it's got that little bit of a snare-like mid-range punch, it's really subtle. We don't want to cut all the mid-range out, so I like it there. That little range there isn't contributing to the sound, but that bit from 200 to 300 hertz is. So we'll leave it around there. Nice and cool. We could always dial it in if we need to, but I think that's about right. So this resonance. What even is this resonance that we want to get rid of? It's quite hard to actually hear the resonance in a sound unless you've got quite trained ears. But one thing we can do to give ourselves a bit of a clue, you'll definitely hear it once we remove it, is if we have a look in the spectrum analyzer, we want to see if there are any resonances, so any peaks in the spectrum that are jumping out a bit too high and look a bit out of place. So if we have a look. So one in particular that I see is this one over here. See, there's that massive peak that just looks a little bit, looks like it's poking out a little bit too far. If you look at all the other spread of frequencies, it's roughly flat, but then there's just one peak that's jutting out a bit far. So we want to ease back on that. So we've got a few ways we can get rid of it. We can either, if we have the spectrum analyzer and we've spotted it, we can simply grab a node over, say hold down Option to change the Q, or just change the Q down here, but I just like to hold down Option. And then make it nice and surgical. It's called surgical because you're taking out a very narrow band, you're being quite precise in what you're doing. And then we can literally exaggerate it so we know we're grabbing the right peak. You can hopefully hear it quite obviously now. And then we just pull it down. And then maybe try tweaking the resonance. So that's not wide enough. And just like that. And then it'll be up to taste how much we get rid of it. So if we turn it off and on, chances are you probably hear, in fact, to make it more drastic, you'll definitely hear it there and not there. If I turn it off and on, you should hopefully hear the difference between with the resonance and without the resonance. Do you hear it now? See how it just sounds a lot flatter and more smooth and more neutral, like it currently is with the resonance removed. Whereas if we still have that resonance, it's just a little bit poking out. And especially if we have a look at what frequency that is, it's 3.5K. That's quite a bright, it's quite a loud, not quite a loud, it's quite a high frequency basically. So when you have that played super loud in a club, or some sort of festival environment, then it could be a bit harsh, a bit piercing, and you don't want that. So it's just flattening that hi-hat out. And you see how it was quite hard to hear the resonance at first until I removed it and then reintroduced it and removed it and reintroduced it. But once we've now heard that resonance, we've got our brain a little bit better at picking out a resonance if you heard another hi-hat in the future. So it just sounds a lot flatter like that versus. Now, there's the argument that says a little bit of a resonance every now and then is perfectly fine. That's what makes a sound a sound. So you don't have to necessarily completely remove it. We might want to ease back on the gain. So you can still hear a little bit of the resonance, but it's not quite as over the top. And then in this particular case, that resonance is giving it a little bit of character. But I personally think when the resonance is there in full force, it's just a little bit too aggressive. It's a little bit too harsh, so I think you'd at least want to remove a little bit like that, and maybe if you want it even flatter, more neutral, then remove even more. And yeah, that's surgical EQing. Definitely use the spectrum analyzer to give yourselves a bit of a clue, or if you're quite new to producing, you can spot a super crazy obvious resonance, but don't go too over the top with this. Don't now look at every single sound you see and go, oh, there's a peak, let's remove it, because that's not the point. In the case of hi-hats, yes, we don't normally want resonant peaks, but in the case of other sounds, we sometimes do, sometimes don't. So use it as a guide, but don't use it as a de facto rule, a thing you've got to 100% do. So yeah, that's surgical EQing. What more can I say apart from